Good day all, welcome back to South Africa, and this is South African Prepper. So, 7th of November 2022, and we're coming to you live from a wet South Africa. So, I want to talk to you about the pending food crisis in South Africa. Now, the easiest way to understand it is it works the same as a cake recipe or a bread recipe. You have to add a whole lot of ingredients for your end product, your cake or your bread, to be baked. And this is the same with what's currently brewing and what's currently happening in South Africa regarding the food crisis that we are predicting. So, firstly off, if you look at the input cost for farmers, it has tripled, and in certain areas you are paying 4 times more. And this includes anything from diesel to spare parts to seeds to fertilizers. Now, if you're going to add all of this in the long run, eventually the end product will obviously cost you more. Now, if you look at South Africa as a whole for food production, South Africa is in an extremely lucky position where we actually produce a lot of our own food. A lot of corn, a lot of soya, a lot of sunflowers, a lot of wheat. So this is the staple foods of most parts of the world. So we're quite fortunate because we do produce quite a lot, and we do produce enough for South African consumption. But unfortunately, what's happened over the years is because of the internal economy of South Africa, most commercial farmers farm for the reason of exporting, because the profit lies in the exporting of the produce. Now, what's happened in the last 5 or 6 months with the Ukrainian-Russian war, if you know anything about Ukraine, Ukraine is a major exporter of corn. To give you an example, South Africa exports or produces roughly about 50 million tons of corn every single year, and a country like Ukraine produces 114 million tons. So it's about 10 times more than South Africa produces. Now, what's happened is that you've taken that 115 million tons out of the world economy, and suddenly the countries that Ukraine used to supply are now running around and shopping around, trying to find corn and the staple foods to import because they do not produce enough for themselves. Now, this leaves South Africa in a quite difficult position because these buyers do have money and are willing at this stage to pay for produce. Now, our last summer season, we had a very good harvest in the economy of South Africa if it comes to corn and wheat. South Africa has done fairly well because we've had a lot of rain. There was a lot of water running, so we were fairly blessed. But what's happened is that these people are now searching around for produce to import into their own countries. Now, including into this ingredients or this mixture is inflation as well. So I'm going to give you a prediction, and we're really worried about this in South Africa because there's a very big consequence that leads to food inflation, food becoming extremely expensive. Now, our prediction is that in South Africa, we might not necessarily run out of food. So you might not walk into a store and there might not be any food on the shelves. There will be, we do believe that there will always be food on the shelf. The problem is affordability. Can the person on the ground, the guy working as a cashier or as a petrol attendant or a gardener or your domestic worker, can those people be able to afford what will be on the shelves? And this is also a food crisis. A food crisis doesn't mean that there's no food. A food crisis also means that yes, there is food, but people can actually not pay for it out of their pockets. They cannot afford to feed their family. That is also a food crisis. And within the next year or so, we are going to feel the effects of the inflation and the input cost that we're currently sitting on. We are going to feel our winter coming next year. We are going to really see food inflation going up. Now, we've seen food inflation going up quite a lot since 2020. We've moaned about it. We've seen it going up. But we are really, from middle next year, starting the South African winter, we are really going to start to feel the pinch, because the increase of the diesel price, and now there's a shortage of diesel in South Africa. So the increase of the diesel price, the increases of the input cost are all going to start to filter down come the next harvest. Okay, you have to understand that a farmer has got input cost when he starts to plant, and then when he harvests, and then there's a small cost factor in between while the produce is busy growing. So at this stage, farmers are battling in South Africa. They're battling with the input costs. They are battling with crime on the farms. People literally going into their fields at night, stealing their produce, stealing their cattle, stealing their sheep, stealing bananas from the trees, avos from the trees, peaches from the trees. And this is the farmer's income that these people are robbing. And they don't rob it per bucky load, or they literally sometimes come with 6, 7, 10 vehicles, sometimes trucks, and they clean out as much as they can in a night. And this is disastrous for farmers. And then on top of that, you've got farm murders as well, where farmers are literally attacked because they are farmers. So farmers in South Africa are under tremendous pressure. And then on top of that, so we are adding the ingredients for the food crisis in South Africa, is that the land bank is the major finance vehicle where farmers go and borrow money, okay, for input cost. They get the money, they buy all of the seeds, all of the equipment, they service it, all of the fertilizers. They use that money to produce food. Now, the land bank gives about 35% of the South Africa agricultural economy's finances. Now the land bank is gone. The land bank has fallen through the floor. It's bankrupt. There's no more money because of corruption, because of nepotism, because of cadre deployment of the ANC. So the land bank cannot help you anymore. So we are predicting that pretty much 35% of South Africa's farmers are most possibly not going to plant to their maximum potential this year. And we are sitting in planting season now as this video is being made. A lot of the dryland farmers will in the next 2 weeks start to plant as well. The guys that do the irrigation farming, they've started a little bit earlier. But we are predicting a big percentage of farmers in South Africa actually not having the finances to go and plant this season. And this is where the expropriation bill does not work. And this is where it seems like these politicians don't understand how economies work. Is that you have to own land in order to go borrow money for input cost to go and plant in order to get a product. That's how it works. That's a cycle of how agriculture functions. Okay, you get finance, you go buy a couple of cows, they produce calves, you go and sell, fatten up those calves maybe, and you go sell them for profit and you pay back your loan. It seems like these politicians, when it comes to agriculture, has got fucking no clue what's going on. Because they want to take your land, they want to put people on them to farm. I'm not sure where they're going to get the finances from, because if the land belongs to the government, you cannot borrow money from it. You need the title deed of the property in order to go borrow money for the input cost of farming commercially. So I want to warn you today that South Africa is staring in the face a very dire food crisis. And we've seen in KZN in 2021 what happens when people see an opportunity. Okay? They burned down KZN, they looted KZN, They first looted KZN and then they burned it down to the ground. And when people become hungry, that is exactly what they're going to do in Africa. So if you are a South African, you need to be preparing. Okay, you need to stock up dry foods. You need to buy seeds like in the back here. You need to be prepared for what's coming, because hungry people will devastate this country. This is South African Prepper. Please like, share and subscribe.